Welcome to episode number 5 of the Hunt Backcountry podcast presented by Exo Mountain Gear. Tonight we're going to talk about training. We're going to talk about preparing for backcountry hunts. But not just some general advice like, hey, you need to get in shape. We all know that. Tonight our guest is Rob Shaul. Rob has a gym called Mountain Athlete, and he works with all types of mountain athletes. Climbers, skiers, guides, and yes, even hunters. So we're going to talk about what Rob has learned in preparing backcountry hunters. We're going to talk about the very specific needs that backcountry hunters have from a physical fitness perspective. Rob has some really straightforward advice that I know you can benefit from. So no matter where you're at on your fitness journey, I guarantee you're going to learn something tonight that can make you hunt the backcountry more effectively. Rob has a really cool 8-week program built specifically for backcountry hunters. And at this point in the season, you probably don't have time to complete that 8-week journey before your hunt. Heck, you may be hunting next week. But I want you to pay attention. I want you to pay attention not only to this podcast, but I want you to pay attention as you're in the field these next few weeks. I want you to come back to this podcast after this season and revisit how you can prepare better for next season. So I hope you enjoy this one. It's a great show. Here's my conversation with Rob Shaul. All right, Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for joining us tonight. So for those that are unaware, sort of what's your background, and then Mountain Athlete, what's the backstory to the gym and to the programming that you've developed through the gym?
I'm a Wyoming native and kind of a self-taught strength coach, and started Mountain Athlete in Jackson, Wyoming around 2007, and just started working. I was working I grew up in a small town south of Jackson here, Pinedale, Wyoming, and sold my business down there, and always kind of wanted to get into strength coaching. And I thought Jackson would be a unique place to do it. And initially when I came up, I started working with professional mountain guides here who guide in the Tetons.
So climbing guides?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah.
Alpine climbing guides. And what I quickly realized was no one had programmed for this type of athlete before in most of the traditional mountain sports. So most of the strength and conditioning programming that's out there is for stick and ball sports, team sports.
Sure.
And so after a couple years of trying to, or probably less than that, about 6 months of trying to get a square peg to fit in a round hole, I had to take a step back and do some reading and do some thinking and start creating and developing my own programming for these unique athletes who train in the mountains.
So I guess that's something you developed too, with the feedback from those guides and things as you're working with them.
Yeah, absolutely. They gave me a lot of feedback, and it was pretty clear that some of the stuff I was doing worked well to get them strong in the gym, but really when it transferred to the mountains outside. And that mindset change was really what liberated me from all that had been written and done before, all I could read about strength and conditioning. And I was able to pick and choose on different techniques and then put them together and pretty soon develop my own on how to train in a gym-based setting for outside mountain performance.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that's actually one thing I wanted to ask about is sort of the differences that you've found working with, climbing guides. I know you work with skiers. Obviously, you have the hunting program that we're going to talk about. You also work with military and law enforcement as well. What are some of those key differences between, in the field performance, in the field preparedness versus just your general strength and conditioning sort of gym performance programs? What's the those differentiators and angles that you've had to adjust?
In the stick and ball sports, coaches are able to do a lot of the on-field preparation in the gym using general strength and conditioning techniques and have the athletes perform fairly well. What we kind of learned over the years is that we can use general strength conditioning. I say general with a certain bias for each of the different group of athletes that we work with, further out from an event or a selection or a season. But as you get closer to the season, like we're talking about today, the hunting season, you need to get more sport specific and focused with your programming. And so what happens is we use some general strength conditioning techniques, again with certain accents to them or biases, and then as we get closer to the season, we drop into sport specific cycles like the backcountry program. Stepping back on that general stuff, one of the things that we found is in a lot of stick and ball sports, they're really interested in absolute strength of athletes. How strong can I get an athlete? And then also in sports like football, they're also interested in how big can I get this athlete.
Sure.
So one of the main differences between the athletes we work with and those is that I'm really interested in what I call relative strength, and that's strength per body weight. Any extra weight I put on a professional backcountry hunter, which is getting him big arms and big shoulders or something, which he isn't using in the field, is just more mass he has to pack up and down the mountain.
Right.
And this is the same for guides, for skiers. It's more weight that their knees have to take as they bounce down the mountain. For military guys, it's just again more weight they got to pack around that they're really not using.
Yeah, and it's not only. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not only more weight that they're packing, but the physical demands of the body supporting muscle mass in terms of you get in a backcountry environment, and don't muscles sort of require more oxygen?
Yeah, exactly. Some of the oxygen that should be going to your legs to get you up the mountain to chase the elk is trying to keep blood flowing through your big biceps and chest. The other element of that is that you only have so much time to work with an athlete, and if you spend an inordinate amount of time on developing strength that they may or may not need, then you're taking away from time from developing a fitness attribute that they'll need. So, for example, mountain athletes most mountain sports involve hiking up and down hills, and there's a big endurance component to that. So if we spend too much time developing strength, and we get too far away from that type of endurance, it just isn't going to transfer to the field. So those are two areas. More specifically, military athletes in general need to be stronger than mountain athletes. Most mountain athletes, they carry heavier loads. They need to have a higher work capacity for short, intense events, firefights and things like that. Mountain athletes in general need greater endurance. They don't need to be quite as strong as military athletes. They just don't carry that type of loadage. Law enforcement athletes don't need a whole lot of endurance, and they are one athlete community that could use some upper body mass and strength or more than the others, not only for handling bad guys, but also there's an intimidation factor that can come with being a cop with big biceps and a big chest, and just being big like that can keep a guy from doing something stupid. So
yeah, little intimidation factor.
Yeah, so there's an element to that. So just real quick, those are some differences between the different groups of athletes that we work with on the general fitness side.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, that's a great concept that you mentioned of keeping general fitness, and then as you approach closer to a season or event, which for us tonight, is hunting season, maybe it's a big sheep hunt that somebody's going on or things like that, where we have to get more specific in terms of preparing for that event. So let's begin to talk about that for backcountry hunting. I was pretty impressed from the outset with the introduction to your backcountry big game hunting program, because in the very beginning you talk about the programming preparing you for steep, rocky terrain, for covering long distances, for carrying heavy loads, and you just really hit on all the key aspects that are really specific to hunting the backcountry. And so to me right away, I was like, oh, these guys actually know what they're talking about, and they're preparing us for what we need to do. So, beyond the little bit I mentioned, what do you see as the particular needs or challenges? What are the particular things in the big picture that backcountry hunters need to prepare for?
The obvious one, there's three that kind of really come to mind. The first one is strength and mode-specific work capacity for hiking uphill. Mm-hmm. That can be a breaker under load.
Sure.
So ideally, you're going to shoot something up high and get to walk downhill with it, but you might have to carry it uphill too. But yeah, so
and coming down's a workout too, actually.
Oh yeah,
on the knees and yeah.
And so that hiking uphill under load, and so that's the first one that comes to mind. There's a couple components to that. One is one of the tricky things about endurance or work capacity training, in this case endurance training, is that it's mode specific. So what that means is that you could go to the swimming pool and swim your heart out and swim miles at a time, and only a certain amount of that aerobic fitness is going to transfer to hiking uphill under load because you're using different muscles when you're in the different modes.
Yeah.
And so
cardio isn't necessarily cardio if we're just talking aerobic activity. You can be specialized.
Yeah, and for the athletes I work with, not necessarily backcountry hunters, but definitely guides and some of the free skiers and all the military law enforcement guys, they can, their lives are in danger sometimes doing their job or their work. And so I can't risk it not transferring. So in terms of hiking under load, there's there's a work capacity aerobic element to it, and then there's also a strength element to it. It's like a bunch of single leg squats stepping uphill. So we need to get your legs strong in that in a single leg manner, and then also your calves are sometimes the first things to go if you're not training your calves. We have a couple exercises that you do again and again in this program as we get sport specific. One is step ups, where you pretty much get on put your pack on and you step up and down off this bench a bazillion times. Pure drudgery, but very effective. Mm-hmm. Building not only the specific strength, but also the cardio for hiking uphill. And
for those guys that are wondering, what's the general height that you guys are using for step ups?
We recommend a 16 to 18 inch step. Okay. Ours are 17 inches, and that's a little bit higher than you're going to actually take in the mountains, but it's going to get you stronger too.
Sure.
And then we have calf raise intervals, we call them, to develop your calves. And then, like you said, there's another element, is a real important element, is coming down under load. And there's a couple things about that are really interesting. When you come down, you're not necessarily using your legs to. It's called eccentric strength. In other words, you're fighting gravity from forcing you into the ground, and that's called eccentric strength. And it's its own type of strength. It's very intense. And if you were to go out, just a normal guy, relatively fit guy, and hike 1,500 feet uphill, and then come down, he would be sore the next day, but it wouldn't be from going up. It'd be from coming down.
Right.
That eccentric strength that it takes to come down is much more intense than going uphill. And so in the program, we have something that we developed for skiers, actually. When they ski, gravity bounces a skier down the hill, and they're just keeping themselves up as they go down the hill. This type of strength is the same as hiking downhill. And we developed an exercise we call a complex, a lower body complex we call the Quadzilla complex, that is really great at developing this eccentric strength.
Yeah.
And this program really features that. So that's not only going to make your legs strong, but it also help you develop that eccentric strength. And then when you get out to the field, you're not sore as hell the second day that you can't get out of your sleeping bag. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. My partner and I, we shot a bull at like 10.7 last year and had to go up over 11.3. And so initially when we went back to get it and pack it out, I mean, we each had loads, like 100 plus, and getting from 10.7 to 11.3 was certainly work. But then we had to go from 11.3 back down to the truck. And it was about, 5 miles of downhill, and
Yeah.
it was brutal. And I realized quickly, that I had trained so much on uphill, that I knew going into that, in the midst of that, that I had weaknesses, because you just feel it. You're using your muscles so differently. So what if you could just a little sneak peek? You mentioned that complex you guys put together. Is there just one or two maybe specific exercises you could mention for how you build the strength for downhill?
Yeah, our downhill strength builder is this Quadzilla complex, and this entire plan is really deploys limited equipment. I designed it specifically that way, so guys wouldn't have the excuse that they needed a gym. I mean, with a sandbag and a rucksack and a bench and a pair of dumbbells, you're good to go.
Okay.
And it's simple, and it's just a complex where you hold a pair of dumbbells. Men will use 25-pound dumbbells, and you'll do some in-place lunges, stepping forward and stepping back, and then you'll do some jumping lunges with the dumbbells, and then you drop the dumbbells and do jumping lunges without them, and then do some squat jumps with unloaded. The eccentric strength is worked not when you're jumping up, but when you land and catch yourself and stop yourself from going into the ground. That's how this complex develops eccentric strength. It's been really successful for us. We get our pro skiers to the mountain really strong, and others have used this program for backcountry hunting. Have had great success with it.
Is that one of the programs that's available through the website specifically? Is that Quadzilla Complex?
That's just an exercise,
okay.
And the exercise is featured in this. Training program, this backcountry hunter training program.
Okay, it is part of that.
Oh yeah.
Perfect.
If you go to the website and just click our exercises, you can find the Quadzilla complex, and it'll explain it too.
Awesome. So besides sort of legs and lungs in that aspect, are there any other key aspects for a backcountry hunter that you see?
There's a couple more key aspects. The next one I want to talk about would be what I just call your mountain chassis, and this is your midsection, your core strength. It kind of goes, from the thighs up to the shoulders, but for carrying heavy loads, it's really that core strength. And there's a huge core strength focus in this program. We deploy a couple of exercises that really develop this. The first one is called a sandbag get up, and this is probably my favorite core exercise ever. I first used it when I designed a program for a pre-deployment program for guys going to Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And, they carry some monster loads over there up and down mountains, and you pretty much stick a sandbag on your shoulder. For men, it's a 60-pound sandbag starting out, and you lay down and you get up.
Yeah. So is that a similar movement to like a Turkish get up then, with like a kettlebell or something of the sort?
Yeah, it's a similar movement. The load's a little bit heavier. You don't have your shoulder up, your arm up, so it doesn't tax your shoulder. And some of the kettlebell guys with the Turkish get up have a really specific, they choreograph the moves you're supposed to use to get up.
Yeah, they break it out in segments, and yeah.
Yeah, I don't care how you get up. You just got to get up.
Right.
And this is you'll do this program has bunches of reps. I think you start out at doing 40 of them at 60, and at the end you're doing 60 of them at 80 pounds. It's a great core strength, mountain chassis strength exercise. For hunters, that's the thing, right? You can kind of game, maybe not training your core so hard when you're packing around your 25-pound, day pack and your bow or whatever.
Yeah. But
when you get that animal down, you got to carry everything out. Like you said, you guys were carrying 100 pounds, right?
Yeah.
It's no joke. I mean, you can really get hurt, and you need some serious midsection strength to be able to do that. We also have in the plan a bunch of just unweighted core circuits that we layer on top of the sandbag get-ups that try to hit all the different angles that you'll be moving. The core circuits have a real strong low back emphasis to them because that's generally the first thing that goes. Mm-hmm. And then finally, when you're doing step ups, I have you wear a pack. And so that's actually training your midsection at the same time you train your legs. It's a 40-pound pack for men. And then the last thing we do is this plan involves just rucking or just walking fast under load. And for men, I think it's 65 pounds, 65 or 75 pounds. So we want to train exactly the muscles you're going to be using when you're carrying your game out, and just have you. I think you end up going 6 miles is the top of the progression for rucking around with a heavy pack. So those exercises are all designed to focus and train your midsection for packing your game out.
Yeah, that's so important too. I mean, I think there's an unfair thought out there. A lot of guys might hear core and they just think, aesthetics or abs or doing crunches. But I mean, as you said, when you're underweight with a pack, that whole midsection, lower back, it's just so important to have that strength there. I like the way you put it with, it's a chassis. It really is sort of, think about it. It's the center of everything else that's happening. So those sound like awesome ways to certainly get some strength built up and stability really built up in there. So what's that? I noticed there's that third aspect that you talk about, which is somewhat physical, somewhat mental. Can you go into that?
I call that mountain stamina. And what I want to do is I kind of designed this plan for guys who are going to go out for a week, or maybe a little bit longer. And when I say stamina, there's some elements to stamina. One is recovery, be able to go hard one day, get up the next day and go hard again, get up the next day and go hard again. In other words, you haven't done all this planning and spent all this money or whatever, taking this time off from work to go hunting, and on the third day you got to lay in the sack all day because you're just exhausted and destroyed. And so there's a day-to-day stamina element to that. The volume in this training plan, it progresses. So the first week is a hell of a lot easier than the 7th week, Mm-hmm. So across the week, you're just doing a bunch more volume every day as we increase the reps and stuff of the exercises. And then finally, on the weekends, we have you do what are called mini events. What was kind of interesting about designing this training plan is it brought together all the stuff we had done for mountain guides and mountain athletes, and also some of the interesting stuff that we've done, innovative stuff we've done for military guys going to special forces selections. Mm. And mini events are just long beat downs, not super heavy, not super intense, every little component of it. But over the course, I think this plan, you start at 2 hours and you end up at 4 hours of just pretty much constant movement, a lot of it under load. And the idea there is to try to train your body to be able to take that much work, and then train you mentally to be ready. And also it adds, there's a strong mental fitness to this also. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that when you get out there and you get something down and you got a long day, you're not the guy whining about it. You're just grinding through.
Yeah.
It's that type of mental fitness. I think we've all been out in the mountains with somebody who just wasn't mentally fit, and they whined and it made it miserable for everybody. You don't want to be that guy, right?
Right, for sure.
And so yeah, there's that mountain stamina is a real important component of mountain performance, and it's kind of the third leg of this training plan.
Yeah, it's kind of to hopefully be in, as ready to go and get out of that sleeping bag on the last day as you are on the first.
Yeah, ideally, you're just ready to go. And what's interesting about our approach is for all the mountain sports, there's not a strong tradition of gym-based or any other type of training for mountain sports. A lot of mountain athletes just kind of do their sport to train for it. And that's really not just being super professional about how they do it. You can get so much from gym-based training. We call it respect the sport, respect the mountain. If you train for your sport, it just shows respect to the sport. You know what I mean? It's like on the hunting side, it's like making sure you're a good shot with your bow and doing that practice and training ahead of time.
Yeah.
Respecting the mountain is just a realization that the mountain doesn't care about you. Mm-hmm. There's no There's no light, slow, easy to shoot big elk for unfit guys, right?
Yeah, right.
There's one friggin' elk, you know, and if the elk's on the other side of this mountain, there's not like there's a tunnel through it because you're unfit and didn't prepare for it.
Yeah.
The mountain is going to do its own thing, and you know, there's hunters who get lost and die of exposure every year or get injured. I mean, you can die out there, and so I think by going into your season mentally and physically fit, you're just showing respect to the sport and then respect to the mountain, and I think that's real important. Kind of that more professional, respectful attitude towards the whole thing.
Yeah, I really do appreciate you bringing that up. I mean, there's quite a uptick in terms of fitness and hunting. A lot of it's good, and I think that that's such a key element that maybe sometimes we as hunters, or even hunters who are into fitness, miss, is how respectful it can be. I mean, the last thing you obviously want is to get out there, to overexert yourself, overextend yourself, and maybe get an elk down where you physically are not prepared to get it out there, and then, you know, you risk losing meat or something to that effect. So yeah, that's a great point, to respect the environment and the animals that we're chasing. And then, like you said, I mean, they're out there 24/7. Or you're going into their home, you're going into their terrain. They're fit and prepared, so we certainly have to do our job to do what we can to be prepared as well. So,
go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to ask about is, I know that this program was, the big game hunting program was just recently updated. I think it's on the third version now. Is that correct?
It's second or third, yeah.
Yeah. Do you recall any specific programming changes that you made, and then why? I mean, was that based on feedback? Was it just something you were noticing where you could increase or better prepare a hunter? What are some of those changes that have evolved from when you first thought of making this program to where it is today?
Yeah, as we just with all of the programs that we do, we're always working to constantly improve. And so as we learn and grow, then we go back and we apply what we've learned to programs that we built in the past and improve them. Specifically, this one, a couple of things I recall is we added the mini events. The prior program didn't have the mini events. And I think another thing that we added was the Quadzilla complex. We had used another complex for training eccentric leg strength before. It was effective, but it's not as good as the Quadzilla complex. Mm-hmm. And so we added that one in here. And I think the other one had, I could be wrong, I could be getting my programs mixed up, but it started out with a general fitness strength element to it, and then we got sport specific. Gotcha. We kind of went right sport specific with this one.
Yeah.
I wanted to limit the equipment. In other words, I wanted to be, you know, anybody who seriously wants to train, you don't need a gym to do this. You know, like I said, you need a bench, a backpack, a pair of 25-pound dumbbells, and a sandbag. And right. I can get you in world-class shape. So there's really no excuses. I wanted to take that element out of there. A lot of our programming for these sport-specific selections are moving in those directions. We don't need the barbell to train you to hike uphill. So those are three things that I think are improvements in this plan over the old one.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was excited to see the plan. I'm one of those guys that, you know, work 2 jobs, have a young family and everything else. And so it's hard for me to get in the gym. And then the other thing is, I just, you know, if I'm working in the office all day, I just don't want to spend any more time inside. So I like to train outdoors and trail run and things like that. And, you know, some of the ways that I've prepared for my hunts in the past was specifically with, you know, a simple setup of my backpack with some weight, a sandbag, and then kettlebell or dumbbells. And so I was excited to get my hands on this program and see what all I can do with just that little bit of equipment, because my eyes were open to, man, just with already what I have, I can prepare so much better. So with those few things, it is, like you said, I think following this program, looking at it, you can get in really good shape for hunting for sure. So I had a question as well. It's a 6-week program, at least as it's outlined. Again, that's getting sport specific as you lead up to season. Would you recommend doing this like the 6 weeks leading up to a big hunt, or do you, obviously account for some sort of rest or taper? If you were to pick a timeline for this 6 weeks, how far out from the hunt would you have somebody do it?
It's actually an 8-week program.
Oh, 8 weeks? Okay.
Yeah, and the last week is a taper week. So, I want you to do this. Let's say you were leaving, you were driving to the mountains on a Sunday and going to be hunting Monday. I don't want you to finish it the week directly before.
Okay.
So there's no need to take a week off before you go hunting. You can do this program right until, you go hunt with a couple days rest from the last day. You can do it right until you go hunting. You're tuned up. You're ready to go. You've been able to recover from all the sessions. There's a taper week built into it. The 8 weeks directly before you go hunting, I want you to go ahead and do this. It does assume that you'll have a couple days, of travel or a weekend before you just start. So just a couple days total rest is all you need.
Yeah. So then on the flip side of that, what about post-season or post-event when we're talking sort of, that general off-season fitness, not necessarily sports specific? Do you have another, sort of off-season program, just a general strength and conditioning program that hunters could use, throughout the later fall and winter as they sort of, do that yearly cycle and build back up to a preseason sports-specific program? We
do. Right now, we don't offer it as a single program through a subscription to the website. We have a mountain athlete section, and there's a part in that we call mountain base or base fitness for mountain athletes. And that's that general fitness for mountain athletes. There's a strong endurance component to it. You do some, it requires a gym. You do some strength training, solid strength training, solid work capacity training, but it's general fitness with an accent towards mountain sports. That's what I'd recommend for guys who are for mountain athletes. The one thing that may not apply to hunters is there's also a climbing component to that, and so there's a
like grip strength and things like that.
Yeah, we actually have guys go to the rock gym and do some rock climbing. A lot of the sports involve, climbing of some type, so it's a way to keep tuned up for that. But if the guy got on that and he had a question or needed something else to do while they're doing a climbing session, we have just punch me an email and I'll line them out.
Okay. And then a couple more questions. One kind of on that topic. Are there any other programs that you do offer that you think would apply to a hunter? I mean, you mentioned sort of before that, there's obviously some commonalities between like the guys who are going to ruck in Afghanistan or what have you. Are there any other, predefined programs that you'd recommend for a hunter who's maybe just wants to try something else out?
Yeah, we have we recently started doing some really interesting programming on the military side, and we have we kind of call them our virtue series of programs, and we got two in particular. One is called Fortitude, and the other is called Valor, and they're both 6 weeks long, and they'd both be great to do prior to jumping into this sport-specific backcountry hunting plan. But they involve not only gym-based strength and work capacity, but also some endurance running and endurance ruck running. We actually run or hike or move really fast under load. And there are quite a few commonalities, I think, between tactical athletes, especially on the military side, and what backcountry hunters can find themselves in situations that they'd be involved in. So those are two programs I think that would be great to do. And it's kind of neat because they involve not only, gym-based stuff, but, when we did Valor, we were, up real early in late fall, still on the ground, running with 45 pounds on the sledgehammer. It's kind of cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. Cool.
They're fun programs. They're really fun. And they're no joke. I mean, they are seriously, they're no joke. But, for serious athletes, you kind of like to push it. I think most serious backcountry hunters are kind of like that.
Yeah, for sure.
It'd be fun for them.
Cool. Well, one last topic. All this talk of training and everything else, I don't think you can necessarily outwork a really crappy diet. And you had just a little bit about diet in the hunting program that I got to see, literally about 5 or 6 lines of information on diet, which I actually appreciated. But can you go through your philosophy, which is really simple and straightforward on diet, and why you think it works?
Yeah, in general, I think there's a lot of gimmickry when it comes to nutrition and diet and supplements and all that stuff. And most of us know, I guess, good nutrition doesn't take a nutritionist or a calorie counter or, a book. It just takes discipline. I think we all know when we're eating crap. And our dietary guidelines are really simple. Just 6 days a week. All you can eat is meat, vegetables, fruit. Don't drink any calories. A little bit of hard cheese, nuts, seeds. And 1 day a week, cheat like a mother. So you can eat anything. What you can't eat during the 6 days is you got to avoid bread and beans and rice and carbs like that. You can eat as many vegetables as you want, but stay away from bread and rice and potatoes and things like that. No potato chips, no alcohol. And then that 1 day a week, cheat like a mother. And so you can eat anything you want. Sugar, donuts, beer. You have donuts and beer for breakfast.
That's a good cheat day, right?
Yeah, we found a couple things. One is that you can't stay on the 6 day week diet if you don't have a cheat day.
Yeah.
We just can't do it. And then the second thing we kind of found was that the more you're able to stay strict or eat what we call is eating clean on your 6 days, the less you kind of crave the crap on your cheat day.
Yeah.
And if you do eat it, it kind of makes you sick.
Right. It's true.
Eating less of it. You still cheat, but it's not like when you first start doing it, you go crazy, but then 6 months into it, you'll be kind of surprised how little you cheat on your cheat day. And what we found is this is just a great way a simple way. 80 to 90% of body fat is diet related. Like you said, you can't outwork a shitty diet. And so guys who have been eating shitty will just shed some pounds.
Yeah.
And so it's just a really great way to kind of lean up and kind of cinch up and get tighter. The other thing when it comes to nutrition is there's a difference between day-to-day nutrition, which is that diet, and event nutrition. And this is something that I've really bought into here recently. And event nutrition is using gels and goos and other things is similar like that when you're actually out there moving in the mountains. Not only for your mini events in this program, but when you're actually out in the mountains moving. Mm-hmm. You'll be amazed. I don't know if you do this yourself, Mark, but if you're shooting a goo and drinking water every hour, you'll be amazed how much that improves your performance.
Yeah.
We can learn so much from the endurance athletes on that side. And this winter I had one of my skiers went and tried to climb and ski this huge peak in Alaska, and I designed a nutrition program for her, and she was looking at a 24-hour push, and she had lots of goos and mix in her drinks and stuff, but it really makes a huge difference. So nutrition or event nutrition is different than the day-to-day nutrition. Event nutrition, I would encourage guys to invest in gels, and there's also certain types of mixes that you can put in your water that actually is a little bit lighter than carrying the gels around, that comes with calories and protein in them. And you can actually drink your calories and get hydrated at the same time.
Yeah.
Those things really make a difference for performance.
Yeah. Yeah, I do that because I pretty much follow a diet that's pretty similar to your recommendations anyway through the week. But, a lot of times if I do like a long trail run on the weekend, I'm doing it really early in the morning. And so I'm pretty fasted already beforehand, usually like 10 or 11 hours fasted. And, normally during the week I skip the sugar and everything else. But if I skip, some goo or something like that on a, hour and a half plus trail run, I'm just, my performance is horrible. So yeah, that's a great point. There's certainly some, I think for at least most folks, who are even fairly low carb during those 6 good days, your body has different demands when you're doing, especially a long or intense event for sure.
Yeah, I had a recent experience that myself. A buddy went and did a long traverse here south of Jackson, across this range, and we were putting in. It was really up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
And 14 hours to go 20 miles, which usually we can move a lot faster than that. But we did a couple of those days, and we were really strict with our gels and our goos, and every hour in water and stuff, and man, we would have really been hurting, I think, if we hadn't done that. So yeah, that event nutrition is really important. And one of the great things about the mini events of this training plan is you'll get to experiment with, what works for you as an athlete. And some athletes like a certain brand of gel, or they don't like gel, they like the drinks, or, and it gives you an opportunity to experiment with that as well. I mean, you want to be wearing your boots, testing out your ruck, making sure that all your gear's dialed, and it'll help you get all that stuff dialed too before you get in the field.
Yeah. Yeah. I did a rim to rim at the Grand Canyon earlier this year. And so, I was like 26 miles, and it was a long day. And they actually had a bunch of college students there. I think they're graduate students actually from the University of New Mexico, I believe. And they were doing a nutrition analysis and study of all these people who were doing the rim to rim. So I opted into it, at 4:30 in the morning when we started at the trailhead. They took metrics and my weight and all that, and they actually wanted me to keep all of the packages from the food for the whole trip. And then when we got to the other side of the Grand Canyon, 26 miles later, they redid all of our weight and everything else like that. And so they're supposed to actually send the participants the results of that study, but I'm pretty curious to see how that plays out. I was one of the few people who didn't lose a fairly significant amount of weight, and that was because I was really purposeful about staying on top of all those things. And I think that translates into hunting, especially you guys who are doing those long trips. I mean, you may not feel like eating, but you got to stay on top of your calories, because if you don't, it's going to come up and bite you, and you're going to get sick and exhausted before you realize it. So that's great advice. So in closing, Rob, what else, where can we find you? How can we learn about everything that you're offering?
Yeah, you can go to strongswiftdurable.com or mountainathlete.com, and we've got a lot of different stuff going on. We just moved into research ourselves. We have an on-staff PhD now, and we're doing human performance research, and so we're moving in really exciting directions. But if you just search on the site for Backcountry Big Game Hunting Plan, you'll be able to find the plan. And if guys have any questions, I answer questions all the time. Email just Rob at mountainathlete.com, and I'll get back to you. I'm real responsive. And I think that the last thing to kind of say about preparing for the hunt, whatever your event is out in the mountains, is that most guys are going to be doing this alone, because their buddies, unless they're hunting buddies, are going to think they're crazy, right?
Right.
And so when you're doing, I think at the end of this thing, you're doing 1,000 step-ups, which is going to take about 50 minutes of pure drudgery.
Wow.
But I think what we've kind of found with athletes that we've worked with, especially ones who don't necessarily live in the mountains and have planned all year for a big trip, whether it's climbing the Grand Teton or a week skiing event here, or a backcountry hunt here in Wyoming or someplace else, is that training for, kind of the trip becomes part of the experience. And, after a while, it's not just work and drudgery. It kind of gets you pumped up and excited, because you're going in there fit, and you're respecting the sport and respecting the mountain. And then finally, when you get there, it just helps you enjoy the event or the trip or the hunt so much more.
Yeah.
And you get so much more out of it, because you're just not suffering.
Right.
I would encourage guys not to think of this as work, but kind of think of this as the instead of a week-long backcountry hunting trip, they get a 9-week-long one, counting this.
Yeah, there you go.
So it's just a way to kind of think about it.
Yeah. Awesome, Rob. Well, thank you for your time.
Yes, sir, Mark. Good luck to you, and thank you so much.
All right, that's a wrap on this episode. But before we go, I wanted to give a shout out to Ed Ross. He left us some awesome feedback, and he's this week's giveaway winner. So Ed, thank you for that. You, the listener, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes or email us with your questions or comments to podcast@exomountaingear.com.
Thank you for listening to the Hunt Backcountry podcast.